Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2692 of The Tom Woods Show. We have our old friend Cliff Maloney, CEO of Citizens Alliance, with us today. And I'm sorry that it took me so long to release an episode on Charlie Kirk, but last week was my annual conference and then a workshop I run twice a year. So I'd gotten my episodes out before leaving, and then this happened and the episodes were just running and there was no way for me to do anything else. So the earliest possible opportunity, here I am with Cliff Maloney, who knew Charlie a lot better than I did, because if we met, it was very, very briefly. But Cliff, let's talk about this. I mean, I don't know that there's much left to say that hasn't already been said, but I will say that a lot of people who aren't that political, or who may be political but didn't follow Charlie all that closely, or may even have disagreed with Charlie a little bit, were telling me I am much more affected by this than I thought I would be. And that's kind of interesting. I wonder what it is that could account for that specific aspect of it.
Well, I think number one, we all saw it, right? Even those that didn't quite see it in real time or see it, in the minutes that followed it. I mean, it was, just horrific to have to watch that. I mean, he is a friend of mine. I don't think I'd ever have on my bingo card to have one of my personal friends politically assassinated. It was so difficult to watch. But I think that was the first point, was that because it was something we all saw and it was a face that many people knew, I think that was it was almost unreal when you saw it. Number two, I would say, is I think it was the reaction from so many people just saying he deserved it. And, this guy was horrific. I'm obviously talking about a lot of the radicals on the left, but I actually think, Tom, a lot of normal people that are not politically inclined, they are not reading Hayek, Rothbard, Mises, or Woods, right? They're normal folks they're trying to put food on their table. I think they've been told for years that Charlie Kirk was this radical, right-wing nut job. And because of this, I think a lot of people took maybe only 5 minutes, but they started listening to him. They started watching some of the videos. And I think that's what's made this significant, is they're responding now by saying, I thought you guys told me this guy was Hitler. I thought you told me he was the enemy. And when they are now diving in, they're realizing, why are you just creating this environment where this guy's radical? It seems pretty normal to me. So that to me has been a phenomenon that I've seen.
I think maybe one other feature is that we all knew that his personality was such that if he weren't discussing controversial topics, people would consider him quite likable. He was affable. He was, it's become a cliche now, but he was interested in debate. He would scold his own followers if the other side was trying to speak and they were being too loud. He would say, no, wait a minute, give this person the opportunity to speak. So, I mean, I think if it had been one of our, let's say, more boisterous or louder personalities, not that it would have justified murdering the person, but there's something particularly disturbing about this obviously harmless guy being targeted, out of everybody. They're going to go after him. And a couple of us, well, I'm sure there are more than a couple, but on X said, I don't think you understand that Charlie was the nice version.
Right. I
don't think you're going to like what comes now.
And I don't mean to call Charlie the moderate. Okay, God rest his soul.
He would hate that.
Right. But there is some truth to this idea that Charlie is a very nice guy. Charlie is a very humble guy. I mean, when you really get him, not just in a public presence, but in a private presence. I mean, he says what he believes what he says. And I think that, who they painted him to be. A lot of people on the far left think, oh, that's who we were going for. And it's like, when you really lay down all the cards and you look at what hands were dealt, you're going to not radicalize, but you're going to mobilize, and you're going to engage a lot of the people that are far more extreme or are, in these positions of what they tried to paint Charlie to be in. And I think, I saw you tweeting that. I think Dave Smith put it out. It's like, this is not the guy you think you're going after. And once again, the thing that excites me the most is anybody out there who has beliefs or principles or content, however you're putting it out there. Obviously, you don't wish to be not alive anymore. But what really is one silver lining, if there can be one, is that people are looking at his content. And I'm not talking about people that have all seen it. Yeah, we're all rewatching it. I've seen the video of election night with me and him when we called it, and Erica comes running in the room because he's breaking down crying. It's been awesome to see all those. There's good moments. But there's so many people out there that are not engaged. They're at least trying to look into it. And Tom, I got to tell you, you and me have known each other for years. I have never been in this as somebody who is out there professing my faith. I am a Christian, but I is not, I got into this through Ron Paul. I got into this through the principles of liberty and the idea that what is the government's proper role? And should we have this endless foreign policy? Should we have a runaway spending propped up by the Federal Reserve? Those were the things that excited me. I have never seen the type of response spiritually from any political, and I'm 34. Maybe you could say, listen, if you extend it out a couple years, but I've never seen the type of spiritual response that I'm seeing from people that haven't been to church in decades, that have never been to church, that people are announcing they're picking up their Bible. That to me is power of what Charlie was really representing in his following. And I wouldn't have, not that I predicted anybody getting hurt, but I've never seen a response like this.
That is another. So one aspect of it that stands out is what I said at the beginning. All people who don't necessarily follow him all the time, nevertheless feeling very affected by it. And secondly, indeed, there being a spiritual effect that it's had on people. And I can't help recalling the old libertarian historian Ralph Raico, deceased for some years. But he once told me that he said I've been tempted to become a Christian just to spite the modern world, but I've thought that maybe I should have a better motivation than that. But I wonder if, frankly, being exposed to the systematically organized nature of the evil we confront right now, after a while, you can take that only so long before you start drawing conclusions about maybe this means something, maybe something's happening here. And another thing I would say about Charlie, if he had been wearing, swastika tattoos, or gesturing in a certain way or whatever, I don't think he would have been targeted, because that's not the sort of person who naturally attracts a following. I mean, yes, those people will attract a following, but not a big one, not an influential one. But he did attract a following precisely because he didn't do things like that. And that makes it more urgent if you really, really are a fanatic and you really want to disrupt a movement. You would go after the charismatic one. You wouldn't go after the nasty person who turns everybody off.
Yeah, and I think if you look just at his numbers, I think they were putting out yesterday, I was looking, 15 billion views on TikTok just from Charlie's platforms. And eventually you do get too big, right? Eventually you become so large, and whether you want to call it a spiritual battle, whether you want to say it's good versus evil, there are plenty of things that people can disagree with. And I usually hate that as a buffer to start I didn't agree with everything, but blank, blank, blank. Right?
Yeah, I know. I feel like I've done that so much, Cliff, and I feel like no more. No more. I'm not doing that anymore. I shouldn't have to say that.
Right. And I think, COVID, we got to that point where we said no. But I do think that when you watch the video, or if you even just follow the story of Charlie being murdered, it's hard to justify how that can't be the good side in terms of, what Charlie represented. And then to see the other side double down, that, oh, no, you're wrong. It was right to shoot him. He deserved to die. To see people actually putting that out there, I just think it is becoming, once again, the spiritual battle is probably the right word, but it is really, there are good people out there that have good intentions and bad people with bad intentions. And I just think for years, look, Tom, the 24 election, people ask me two different things. One, Charlie would always ask me on his show live, he'd say, how do we get a Ron Paul libertarian to run the Trump campaign's ground game in Pennsylvania. And I'm sure your audience is very split on what I'm about to say, Tom, but it's the truth. I would say this to him. I'd say, look, I am as diehard Ron Paul as they come. But at the end of the day, when they're trying to cut off the private parts of our kids, and when they are trying to tell us who can work and who cannot during COVID, and when they're trying to force us to mask, and you get to a certain point where you just say enough's enough. Now, here's my line. I don't always agree with the right on everything, right? But there comes a point where you're like, man, like I got to get in this fight. And I feel like, in 24, that's what the whole election came down to. I think people that said, are we going to vote for the real thing, at least the authentic side? Or are we going to vote for the thing that, we just don't even, they don't even believe what they're saying. And I hate the two-party system. I hate the dichotomy, but there comes a point where it's like, to me, the whole race was authentic, going on Theo Vaughn, going on Joe Rogan, having long-form conversations with Trump and Vance. And then still you're stuck in the 1990s of talking points from Harris and Walz. I just don't think people are going to put up with that anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing through this tragedy once again.
Well, I wonder on the other side, if this means that in the GOP, not that the GOP itself is full of righteous indignation, but the base definitely is. Does this mean that Romney conservatism is now dead and buried? That the people just won't go along anymore with let's just try to get along with everybody and let's try to meet everybody halfway. That ship sailed a while ago, but it's definitely sailed now.
If it comes back, I believe the GOP is dead. If the Romney types of the weak kind of, Jeb Bush-esque, if they regain power, the GOP, one, I'll have no interest in working within the GOP, to be clear. But two, you're dealing with the Democrat Party that really, and I mean really, is on a new level. Okay, we got mad at them for cancel culture, and now they've moved to assassination culture. Think about that for a second, because now we're wondering, well, should we be canceling people? They move so quick. This is a business for them. And so I think if you have those weak neocon types at the head of the party that just want to make people get along, and if we hire this person, they can go talk to that minority community. Trump just flipped that all on its head, right? These battles right now tell you have to fight. But Tom, I'm telling you, if they go back in that direction, I don't know how they survive. They're not dealing with the Democratic Party of 2008. Right? They're not dealing with the Democrat Party of 2012 or even 16. This is 2025. And I think they're going to continue to get more desperate. And if you're a Republican Party, I mean, I think 2028, whoever the Republican nominee and Democrat nominee are, I think it's one of those resets probably similar to, 2008 or maybe even 2016, where you don't know which way the country's going to go. But I sure as hell hope that the weak Republicans, their time is up.
Friends, if you care about your liberty and your financial freedom, you need to hear this. From October 10th to 12th, my friend Mikkel Thorup, host of the Expat Money Show, and who's been a guest on this program several times. In fact, he even came and joined us on the Tom Woods Cruise this year, is bringing together top experts from around the world for the Expat Money Online Summit. And it's completely free to attend. You'll learn how to legally protect your wealth, secure second residencies and citizenships, reduce your tax burden, and own property abroad, all to safeguard your freedom. This year's focus is Latin America, where opportunity is booming. Argentina is shifting to free markets under Javier Milei. El Salvador is undergoing a radical transformation, and Panama and Paraguay are offering simple residency programs. A Plan B is no longer optional, it's essential. Reserve your free ticket at expatmoneysummit.com. That's expatmoneysummit.com. Take a minute to talk about your role in Pennsylvania in 2024. I did have you on around the time of the election, but your role in Pennsylvania, and then did Charlie have anything to do with that?
Yeah, I'll get right to both because they kind of overlap directly. So I believe it was December of 2023. I get a phone call from Charlie directly, and he says, "Hey, Cliff," he says, "we're putting our strategies together, And what happened, Tom, was in each of the swing states where they changed the rules to allow for this long form, the season of voting, right? Instead of one day, instead of a weekend, instead of a week, instead of a month, like states like Pennsylvania, we had 50 days of voting. And so what happened was we were finally this cycle, meaning the Republicans, were doing what the Democrats had done, which is the party doesn't run these. You go to a 501c4, which is a type of nonprofit. Some people call it a political nonprofit, but a 501c4 where it's endless giving. It's all anonymous giving, but you can use some of the funds on direct political action. And so what we were doing is we were assigning official C4 groups to be in charge of either harvesting ballots or chasing ballots in each of these states. This is separate from registration, right? People know Scott Pressler and some of these other groups that specifically do registration. That's not us. We go door to door. And so Charlie called me and said, listen, I'm doing Arizona. I'm doing Wisconsin, both with his Turning Point action. He said, you guys at Citizens Alliance, he knows I'm from PA. Half of our staff is from PA. PA is one of our top target states. He said, how do I get you to hire 120 people full-time, August through November 5th, knock on 500,000 doors? And our goal was to take Trump from the 20% that we've gotten in previous elections of the mail-in portion, and against Kamala to get that to 33%. So Charlie was the whole reason, kind of motivating me to do it. And then throughout the process, we'd share notes. Him running Arizona, Wisconsin. He had other people he partnered with in these other swing states, but I would report in on Pennsylvania. And so the good news was after we did the work, Trump ended up getting 34.5% of the mail-in, beating our 33% goal against Kamala in PA. He wins PA. And, more specifically to your question about Charlie, not only did he get me involved in that Pennsylvania role, but the biggest thing for us is, we've known each other for years. When I was running Young Americans for Liberty, I'd gotten to know him. A lot of these other groups that mean well, the YAFs of the world, the CRs of the world. Charlie kind of came on the scene and he was just, every event we would go to, Turning Point would have a presence. And so, when I was at YEL, we would try to partner as much as we could because they had real people, right? It was like the Ron Paul folks when it came to YEL. We had real bodies. We had people that wanted to take action. They were motivated. We didn't have the John McCain volunteers, right? They would never show up because they're not motivated by anything. And I always tell them, the email that you share with the list about Charlie emailing you, Tom, I really appreciate you putting that out because I always would tell people, I would go to these big Turning Point events and sure, they might have some speakers that were more the moderate types, but man, Charlie would get on the mic and he would call out Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chairwoman at the time. No other right of center groups were doing that, right? He would bring in economists. He would bring in people to talk about things in a way that just all the stuffy country club Republicans wouldn't do. I've had a great relationship with him for years. It has blossomed over the last year with him assigning Pennsylvania to us, really getting us integrated with getting Trump elected. And election night's where it all culminated. Charlie had me come on his show. And what he asked me to do was he said, listen, if they call Georgia and North Carolina, we're doing a live stream for like 8 hours tonight. Why don't you come on? If you did your job and you won PA, that will call the White House. And so that moment ended up being one of his most viral moments because, like I said, we call Pennsylvania. His wife, Erica, comes in the room. Charlie's breaking down. And then that clip obviously took off. And all I said was, look, remember this moment. Remember where you were when the establishment tried to shut you down, tried to push us out. And we were able to bring this coalition together post-COVID to push back on some of these just tyrants. And wild to think that man is no longer with us.
Well, I'd like to, if I may, actually, you mentioned the email. I just called it up. I want to read this to anybody who hasn't seen it yet. So I got this email from Charlie when he was 18, just about to turn 19, October 1st, 2012. I kept it. This is one of the benefits of being something of a pack rat right now, Cliff, is that I still had this email. But he wrote, Mr. Woods, your speeches on YouTube have inspired me to take action on a national stage. I'm 18 years old and a recent high school graduate. So often in high school, we're told what to think instead of how to think. For years, I felt subject to the system like sheep getting ready for slaughter. Then my friend told me about your videos. I watched every single one and I read 2 of your books. Upon reading your work and watching you speak, I realized that freedom is the solution, not the problem, and our public school education system has done nothing more but perpetuate the problem and make it worse. Inspired by your words, I started an organization, Turning Point USA, which has skyrocketed to the national stage. The basis of our group is to educate our peers about the generational theft that is taking place in this country. I want to thank you for playing an important role in my life. I will continue to read your articles and watch your videos for inspiration. One day I hope to meet you and thank you in person in Liberty, Charlie Kirk. Now, there are a lot of young people who watch my videos, but and there are some who change their worldview because of it. But this guy, a lot of people want to create an organization, but he created an organization that, as you say, was just everywhere, just became massive, absolutely blew up. And I'm sure it's partly on the strength of his personality, but geez, I don't know how to account for the kind of success he had.
Yeah, for any libertarians out there, let me make some weird comparison here. What month did he write that email to you? It was in 2012. What month?
Very beginning of October, his birthday month.
Okay, so I would have just been getting done working for Ron Paul on the Hill. So because Ron was retiring that year, right? Because he was getting out, right? 2012, yeah. So it's fascinating to me. I always think of Charlie, as a kid. He's 3 years younger than me, and I could have written that same exact email. And this is not that I'm trying to convince your audience, Tom, but I just think that so many people, the more time I spent with Charlie privately, the more time I was with him and kind of understanding the worldview, I think he was much more with us in the Liberty Circle than people realized. And that's why reading that email was special to me, because I've been kind of saying that to people. And it's very easy for anyone on the right to get stuck in the box of like Team Red, right? And to just kind of become, whoever the candidate is they're supporting. I don't think Charlie would have done nearly as much as he would have done if some neocon was the nominee. I don't think people realize, whether they love him or hate him, I'm a fan of J.D. Vance. I don't think people realize the role that Charlie Kirk played in making sure that they didn't go with a Nikki Haley or some ticket that was supposed to be a unity ticket between the, let's say, America First and the neocons, right? I think Charlie is much more of a fighter for some of these anti-establishment causes than a lot of people in the Liberty circles want to admit. But I could have wrote that same exact email. That was my life experience. This is me blowing smoke up your rear end here, Tom. Like, that was me.
I appreciate that.
For him say that as somebody at the exact same time going through that, of finding your videos, of finding Ron, of understanding this worldview and these principles, and then for him to go on and do what he did, you deserve a lot of credit for that. You shaped kind of getting him involved.
It was I remembered that he had written to me. And then when I heard this, I thought, I hope I still have that, because that would be the only thing I have that connects me to him. And sure enough, there it was. I just did a search in the old inbox and there it was.
Woods comes through.
How about that? That's really something else. And then I wrote to my mailing list, as you said, about this whole thing. And I said that I met Charlie once on an airplane. It was before he became famous. He's still young. He was going down the aisle and he saw me and he said, "Hey, wait a minute, you're Tom Woods." That I talked to him. That was it. That was it. But then somebody wrote to me and said, no, I don't think that's the case. October 3rd, 2012, you did an event in Chicago, the person says. And I know that because I was there and got my picture with you. And I met Charlie Kirk at that event. So you probably met him there too. And the thing is that because he wasn't a big name then, right, it's very possible I met him and I just didn't remember that. Hey gang, if you're like me, you've been watching the Fed inflate the dollar into oblivion while politicians bungle trade policy and rack up historic amounts of debt. And you're wondering how to protect what you've worked so hard to build. That's why I want to talk to you about Monetary Metals, a company doing something truly revolutionary with gold. We all know gold is a safe haven asset, but let's face it, most gold just sits there in a vault, not doing much. It holds its value over time, but it doesn't grow. What if I told you there's a way to not only own physical gold, but also earn a yield on it, paid in gold every single month? Well, that's exactly what I do with Monetary Metals. I lease my gold with them, and earn an annual yield around 4% in gold, not in paper currency. I keep my ounces, and every month I get more. Think about it. You still benefit from any price appreciation, like what we've been seeing in 2025, with gold pushing past all-time highs, and you also get paid more ounces of gold along the way. That's what makes this model so exciting. It's a genuine breakthrough. For the first time in decades, gold is functioning as a yield-bearing asset, just like in the classical gold standard days. The Fed can print dollars. They can't print gold. It's time to start growing your wealth in ounces, not just hoping for the best with fiat. Go to monetary-metals.com/woods to learn more and see how you can start earning a gold income too. That's monetary-metals.com/woods. But the thing now that we have to deal with is this problem of left-wing violence. Now, the way they want to portray things is that you and I are the violent ones, Cliff, because we're full of hate and we inspire people to commit violence. But the problem with that neat little story is that it's exactly the reverse. That the riots, there's never right-wing riots. When? Give me an example. We all know these are always left-wing. And then we can think of pretty high-profile examples in just the past year or so, or even several years. But that's a problem. And it's true that if you say over and over and over that this person's a Nazi and that person's a Nazi, and by extension, anybody who isn't like you must be a Nazi, there are crazy people who will respond to that. So I don't know that there's a solution to this, Cliff.
Yeah, but I think the one thing that gives me optimism is, once again, I'll go back to this word authenticity. I think when we really lose the country is when normal people, and I mean non-political, just people trying to pay their mortgage, put food on the table, when their gut instinct is wrong, we've lost the country, right? When their gut instinct is to go with the bad side. I just think with all the alternative media, with all the different podcasts, with all the different ways for people to disseminate information, I just think most people, would the George Floyd, would those types of riots have happened today? Maybe. It's not that far out. But with some of these riots from 10 or 15 years ago, I just think most rational people are going to see something and they're not going to react to think, wait, we got to go burn down a city, especially when you see the vigils and the things that are happening now for Charlie. I mean, those photos of comparing legitimately the George Floyd protests to the peaceful prayer sessions when somebody on the right is targeted. Are there always going to be people that are crazy? They're going to come after them and believe that, that person's Hitler, they're evil? Of course, Tom. And I don't know how to solve that. I have no clue how to solve that. But I think the more people go through these experiences and realize how one-sided they are, what is their narrative going to be? If some rogue cop does something, if some crazy right-winger goes after, some Democrat politician, I think you point to how we reacted, and now you have a comparison. I don't want to ever use Charlie as an example, but I don't think there's an easy solution, but I think there's a really easy comparison that sane people would have to look at and say, well, maybe we should react the way they did. That's a more peaceful way.
And maybe the way that it comes to an end is not because the other side decides, it's probably immoral to shoot people we disagree with. Now, and by the way, parentheses, they don't think it's just disagreement, because remember, these are the people who say silence is violence, or bad words are violence. But for some reason, a bullet in the neck is not violence. These are very strange people. But maybe they won't necessarily say, oh, it's immoral to behave this way, so maybe we better knock it off. They may find themselves having to say, it alienates more and more people every time we act like savages. So maybe for purely strategic reasons, we better, knock off acting like savages.
Well, we always teach that politics, people describe it as poly, which is many, and ticks that are blood-sucking creatures, which is one of my favorite jokes. But the real definition of politics is the adjudication of power. And what you just said, Tom, is absolutely correct. And that's the only way I see this thing ending in a peaceful way, is Democrats realizing if we keep doubling down on the insanity, we are not going to have the votes to win national elections. We're not going to have the votes to maintain control of the House or Senate. And then obviously the states, as you get local and local. But I used to think that was always going to be the case. Here's why I worry about that. They ran their entire election on supporting illegal immigrants over Americans and supporting men who think they're women over real women. And look, are those just talking points that were paraded out there? Yeah, but guess what? The Democrats tripled down on them at every turn. I thought after November 5th of 2024, we would see an immediate pivot because of what you just said, which is if they double down or triple down on these 20% issues and they let the radicals keep them in that lane, they're not going to be able to win. They haven't moved away from it. I mean, you've seen snippets from Newsom trying to moderate himself. But for the most part, governors, senators, congressmen, I mean, aside from crazy man, John Fetterman, all of the Democrats still believe these radical things. So I don't know when that pendulum starts to shift back, but hopefully at some point they realize electorally they've got to do this in a peaceful way. But I like what you said because it's true, not because they came to some moral clarity, but because they came to an electoral clarity that they have to do that to win.
You're right about Newsom. He's obviously, going to say what he needs to say. But the interesting thing is that it really wouldn't take a whole lot on the part of the Democrats. If they would moderate the crazy, untenable position they have on transgender issues, and if they would not demonize half the country as Nazis, they would actually, just those two changes would make a difference electorally. And yet, and they're the most obvious changes in the world, and they can't bring themselves to do it. They can't get out of their own way.
Well, the third one that's even easier is just go back to Obama's policy on immigration, right? I mean, the Lord and Savior, Barack Obama. Even getting back to that, they can't do it. And I have this debate all the time, Tom, is it the activists or is it the donors? I'm talking the radical sect.
Yeah. Who's the engine behind it?
Yeah, because look, people ask me, looking forward to 26 and 28, who do you fear the most? Let's say it is Vance and I'm very involved in 28. I fear our governor in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, because he is a Jewish man who presents himself as a moderate. He's a prolific fundraiser, great orator, but he governs as a commie. But here's the thing that I don't know. Are the radical activists going to be able to block him as a Jewish man from being the Democrat nominee? Are the radical donors? I don't know who kind of has, do the sane moderate donors still exist in the Democrat Party? I don't know. I don't really have that answer. But that's why when people ask me about 28, yes, the Republican Party nominee will matter. But I think for the sake of generations, who the Dems pick to be because they have no leader right now. I mean, there is no one out there. Mamdani? No, that's not the guy.
What about AOC?
I think she'll poll well because she, is a likable person. She's an attractive young lady. People know who she is. She's a radical socialist. But it reminds me of some of the early polls when we were in presidential campaigns back in 2012 or 2016, where you have these random people that are just well known, right? I think the Democrats, when they actually spend money, you're going to have Wes Moore out of Maryland, the governor, Josh Shapiro out of PA. Pritzker is going to have unlimited money coming out of Illinois. Newsom, the thing is, people say, how could they get elected? You don't end presidential campaigns because the voters don't want you. You end them because you run out of money. And so that's why I'm always looking, and Tom, by the way, I'm not here to endorse that. Right? I'm not here to say that's good, but I've spent time in the arena, and that's what's going to be interesting is where do these donors kind of line up to try to prop somebody up as the new face?
Well, what do you make of somebody like a Mayor Bloomberg who had all the money in the world and he still had to get out because it was getting embarrassing? He was spending all this money and the needle's not moving.
I always say that there's a certain point, like Jeb Bush in Iowa is a great example. Okay, this is 2016. If you take all the people that voted for Jeb Bush and you divide that by the total amount of money that he spent, I think you could have purchased a $340,000 home for every single one of those voters, right? At a certain point, you have diminishing returns. But a lot of that is while you're on the upslope of becoming known, right? Once you're known, there's only so much you can do to maneuver. But to me, that's why like Bloomberg spending, what was it? Was it $400 or $500 million? I mean, it was just an obscene amount of money. Once you get to the point of being known, there's not many new tricks. It's that kind of surgence of coming onto the national scene and how well was your favorability at that point. Even 2016, when Trump won. If you look at the Iowa caucus, I think 6 different people in the span of 6 months were the front runner, right? You had Jeb at one point. You had Rand at one point. You had, was it Ben Carson? You had Rubio. You had Cruz. You had Trump. I think even at one point, Carly Fiorina was like the front runner. So these things are all about timing, which is why anybody in the lead right now, if it's not the vice president, I just think, you're going to have to see who actually can build a campaign and raise the money to then get their name ID up there and see how people react.
Hey, everybody, are you being lied to? They tell you to defer paying your taxes by saving in a 401k or IRA because you'll retire in a lower tax bracket. But if that were true, why are so many retirees in the highest tax bracket of their lives? Well, it's time to get the truth and discover a better way to grow and protect your money. Bank on Yourself is the proven retirement plan alternative that banks and Wall Street hope you never hear about. With Bank on Yourself, your plan doesn't go backward when the markets tumble. Your principal and growth are locked in. You'll know your tax rate in retirement, 0 under current tax law, which protects you from the coming tax tsunami. You get access to your money for emergencies and opportunities with no questions asked. There are no government penalties or restrictions on how much or when you can take it. And when you use your money, it keeps growing like you never touched it. Try doing that with a 401k or IRA. You get built-in inflation protection too. Your money's guaranteed to grow by a larger dollar amount every year in both good times and bad. You can get a free report that reveals how you can bank on yourself and enjoy tax-free retirement income, guaranteed growth, and control of your money. Just go to bankonyourself.com/woods and get your free report. That's bankonyourself.com/woods. bankonyourself.com/woods. Let me see. There are 2 other things I want to... Okay, first thing. Well, first thing, let me ask you this, because this is the kind of question I would ask at the end, and people might be inclined to switch off. So no, can't do that. I'm going to ask it now, and then I'm going to ask a really juicy question afterward. Tell us about Citizens Alliance. What is it?
So Citizens Alliance, we launched in 2021. Pretty much the vision or the dream is to create one state where we win some liberty battles, and we really have an example. So we're in Pennsylvania, we're in New Hampshire, we're in Idaho, and we're in North Dakota. It might seem a little odd. We've got 2 purple states, 2 red states. The red states, Tom, are actually where we have a lot of fun. We can help write budgets. We can help, totally just remove and abolish some of these tax, just horrible taxes. Civil liberty battles in red states are actually the funnest because you have to get some of the more big government Republicans in line. So what we're doing is we're working at the state level, a lot of door knocking, but we're focused on state house and state senate. We're trying to create state policy that could be examples for what we call liberty policies and the liberty way of life. Tons of different partners in those states, but it's really been exciting. Obviously, that's why we were tapped to do Pennsylvania, even though we were doing the federal level, having those door knocking teams. We don't leave the state. So we are there 365 days a year in all 4 of our states. Sometimes we're pushing liberty policies. Sometimes we're pushing candidates. Sometimes we're just delivering pain, right? You've got horrible Republicans. We're in their district. By the way, political pain, nothing obviously of violence, but educating voters, Republicans, on how bad the Republican reps are. And so my whole vision there is creating a liberty state that is the example so that other states, we learned this during COVID, other states have to say, hey, why aren't we doing it like them? I thought we were all supposed to be, conservative, and that's it's working for them. Why don't we do that? So that's the day-to-day of what we do through Citizens Alliance. People can check us out on X at Doors Win Wars, and that's Citizens Alliance.
Did Doors Win? Did you come up with that?
Oh yeah, we've had that for years.
Doors Win. That was your idea?
Yes, sir. Actually, I'll give Justin Grice credit, my COO, because he's been pushing it. But then we started to brand it. And we locked down all the handles for that a couple years back. Doors Win Wars, because they do.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do. And I did some door knocking. I don't think I've ever said this on the show, but in 1992, I guess I was a sophomore in college going into my junior year, and but I guess I would have been a sophomore when I did the door knocking, because the door knocking was probably in the fall of '91 for Pat Buchanan in New Hampshire, because I was in school. I wasn't going to be
disappointed in you. I didn't want to float the Buchanan name, but yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So I did that because I was I was really unhappy with George H.W. Bush. And like, this guy has to be punished for this. You know, like I feel like my whole life has been, these people have to be punished, and they almost never are. Like the COVID governors, they needed to be punished. They weren't. Like, why does Gretchen Whitmer still have a career, you know? So, but I've always thought they, in principle, should be punished. So I went up to New Hampshire some weekend because they bust a whole bunch of us, and we went door knocking. And ever since then, when I would hear that Cliff Maloney is organizing some door knocking, I would think, that guy really believes in something, because door knocking sucks.
Well,
No
Tom,
desire to do it.
let me tell you how we came to do this. So obviously, this is when I was at YAL. We realized the left, by the way, they know they have a monopoly on some of these things. So there's a book out there. It's called Get Out the Vote. It's up to its fifth, I think the most recent, 5th edition. And they actually walk through the ROI of the different ways, if you're going to spend money in a political campaign, what is the best way to do it? Whether it's knocking a door, whether it's sending a text message, a piece of mail, a TV ad, a radio ad, a digital ad. They go through it all. They did 25 to 30 years of studying this. Obviously, texting hasn't been around that long, but they're looking at the different models, and then they can show you what does it cost for every new vote you earn. And door knocking, by far, you know, it's the best ROI. Now, I meet with all these tech bros, and they're like, are you kidding me? Like, we do micro-targeting. We do this. You know, you got to have the perfect Karl Rove messaging strategy. What's happened, Tom, is everybody is so saturated. Do you and the family have cable?
Yeah.
Do you watch political ads, or tell me the truth? You know you're muting them if you're hearing them. I mean, I guess down in Florida, it's not too bad. In Pennsylvania, it's mute, mute, mute. Nobody is watching them after the 100th time you've seen them.
Yeah.
And so I just tell people that it becomes this saturated thing, that the best return on your investment is an 18 to 22-year-old at the door who's excited, who's motivating you to vote. And then once they changed all these rules that make it where you have to remind people they can vote for 50 days, it became that much more impactful. So that is why we do believe that doors win wars.
That's good. That was a good answer. All right, then let's finish with this. I don't know what the answer to this question is, but another sentiment that I see on X is things are going to be different now. Like that something happened in September 2025. Charlie Kirk and that young Ukrainian woman on the train, that the combination of these things and what they say about the America we have and the America that all normal people would prefer to have, something's going to change. But I don't know. What does that mean? Does it mean that the right wing is going to become less forgiving? It's going to be less compromising? Does it necessarily mean that? What is anything going to come of this, practically speaking?
Well, I've learned this from you, Woodsy, so I don't take offense to it. Take this as a compliment. The answer is no. Nothing's going to change unless that's if I'm a betting man, right? Nothing is going to change. Nothing moves in politics unless it's pushed. But I've learned sometimes you can't push it. You got to put it on a rocket launcher and try to get it out of here. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that this is a moment or a turning point, as we're using the pun. I really hope that people take things more seriously. I really hope that people hold some of the politicians more accountable. As you said, some of the COVID tyrants just not having any accountability. My fear, I got to be careful here as a libertarian. I don't want to get too authoritarian, right? I don't want to push too much. But I actually think Fetterman said it best. These troops in D.C., he said, listen, these aren't Russian troops. He said, they're like my cousins and my uncles and my dads and my sister-in-law. Like, they're normal people, but there's just a presence. I think we do need a presence, not just on crime, not just on the border, but I think we need to start taking things seriously, especially when the left uses all these veiled threats, not even of violence. But why are the Republicans in Congress still putting out hot air press releases that, we've got these very firmly worded letters, and we're going to hold these folks accountable that, they really did an injustice? That has to end, Tom. That has to be done. Like, we need to actually see. I'm not one of those people that says somebody has to be in prison, but you have to hold people accountable with more than just, hey, we're going to subpoena you and we're going to call you in to testify. And I think that the thing that could change in September of 2025 with Charlie's passing is, one, I do think it's going to motivate a lot of people on the right to do the work, which was his message. 2, I think a lot of people are going to turn to the spiritual battle, which is something that he would be proud of. And 3, the one I am least confident in, but I am hoping will happen, is that Republican politicians will actually grow a spine. They will enact things that are really, really long-term, that are not short-term, and try to change the culture on what the role of government is. That's why I got in this fight. And it's the one thing that I'm hoping can come from such a horrific tragedy to try to change hearts and minds about what government should be doing in our lives.
Well, with that, I want to thank you, Cliff Maloney, for coming on here and talking about a subject where there's so much tragedy involved. It's overwhelmingly difficult to talk about. This is the second time that I've had to talk on the show about somebody in our circles generally having been murdered. The other one was a young philanthropist named Gret Glyer, and he was murdered in his bed. And I'm this is not a theme I'm taking any pleasure in, that's for sure. But we have to talk about it. We have to think about what it means for the future, what it could mean for the future. And of course, we're all thinking about his family. Imagine having to talk to those kids, but as they grow up, they're going to know who their dad was. And it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do with their lives after that. But they'll know who their dad was, and they have a mom who will tell them who their dad was and why he mattered and what it means to be courageous. He knew that he was taking a risk in this psycho society. So he's an example to his kids of, you believe in what's good and you fight against what's evil. What more can you do than that as a dad? So anyway, Cliff, thanks again.
Appreciate it, Tom. Thanks so much.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.